Good morning or good afternoon, whenever you're watching this. Today we're going to be covering the patterns of evolution. We're going to be just looking at like specific patterns we see when we see evolution occurring over time. All right, there's different patterns we'll see between different organisms, maybe coming together or growing apart, sort of like There's also sometimes evolution happens really, really slowly, or sometimes it happens really fast, comparatively speaking. Right. So we're going to look at that today. All right, the first thing we're looking at is divergent evolution. If you've seen the movie Divergent, remember she breaks off from the pack, sort of, right? So this is when a single species interbreeds and leads to another species being made, all right? And the breeding can happen like naturally. A lot of times it happens in today's world artificially. Like we'll have a zoo setting or something like that. But that new species begins to branch off and becomes a new species over time. So that's divergent, okay? Convergent is very similar. It's like the opposite, sort of. That's when you have two unrelated distant organisms. They evolve to have very similar shapes, forms, organs, all that type of stuff. They evolve to come together. But notice in here, they never become the same line, right? Like on Divergent, it was one turns into two. This is two becoming very similar, but never becoming the same, all right? And this has a lot to do with how they evolve in their environment. And you'll see this a lot with like geographically isolated things, like a mole, like a mole. You'll see that in America. They also have them in Australia. DNA-wise, they're actually very different, but they've very similar environments have led to the same looking bodies, shapes, forms, that type of stuff, okay? Coevolution, this is a unique thing you'll see in nature, that when one thing, they say two organisms have a very close relationship. When one of them begins to evolve, the other one must evolve or they stop having that relationship. So it's a change in biological objects triggered by the change of another object. Okay, so like in this case is a base tulip, and this is a hummingbird moth. See its long nose, a long beak here. It had to grow a longer beak, or it could not feed on this anymore. So like these tulips evolved to have deeper wells, and this moth had to evolve to be able to access the nectar and water in there. All right. And then we have adaptive radiation. This is when you have one species evolves into several different blooming out. This is like another. This is like a divergent evolution on steroids. So it's one single population evolves into several different ones due to environmental habitats. The beaks on the finches on the Galapagos Islands is a great example. Great example. Then you have something called gradual equilibrium. This is when gradualism. This is when it happens slowly. So variation occurs and it slowly over time. Things evolve. All right, this is slow. So the stripes of a tiger developed over time, so they could blend in and hide in the tall grass. It didn't just happen overnight. Right, that's gradualism. Punctuated equilibrium is when evolution occurs really quickly and it suddenly jumps to new forms. So species of sea animals lives, breeds, and dies for thousands of years, and suddenly the sea levels change and they have to adapt. And so the things that survive are there really quickly. Right. So gradualism is good shown here in this Y shape. Punctuated is this here. So it turns into really, really quickly turns into different things. All right. So gradual. Punctuated is if you put a punctuation mark on the end of something, it's really aggressive evolution. All right. Just know the difference in these. Again, this is just vocab words. You need to be able to identify them when you're given an example. All right. So convergent, divergent, coevolution. So when one thing evolves, the other one must evolve, or the relationship sort of ends. Adaptive radiation, that's when one thing turns into many, and that can be fast or slow. Gradualism, gradually happening, and then punctuated equilibrium happening fast. Hope this helps, and if you have any questions, please contact me. See you guys. Talk to you soon.